Welcome to End of Wash with Bootsy and Sal. I'm your host, Kevin Grogan, aka Bootsy.
And I'm Lou Velosi, aka Sal.
Sal, we got a good one here. But, before we get into the intro, I want to go off on a little something. I usually get up on my soapbox, silly that, and I want to talk to our audience about Burger King. All right. I spent about 30 minutes in line waiting for my sustenance to get, the health food that I enjoy so much. And I was in line behind two other cars for 30 minutes. So I have now established that the Burger King motto is your way, right away, except for you, you can wait for your fucking food. It really, so just want you to know that I'm coming into the show a little hot. So everybody if I seem a little edgy, that's the reason why.
Well, Bootsy, your physique definitely shows that you frequent burgers.
Look at
that. Yep. All right, Bootsy, let's get into the show today. John Del Vecchio, another all-star guest, right in kind of in the same vein as Captain Dale Dye. John is a Vietnam vet who, Bootsy and I hold our Vietnam vets in the highest regard. Warriors, there's like Bootsy, you always like to say, man, they kind of paved the way for everyone else to come behind. And, we hate
guys like us wouldn't exist without those guys.
Yeah, we hate Jane Fonda, and we do share that with all of our Vietnam vet brothers. But John received the Bronze Star in combat in Vietnam. He's a New York Times best-selling author of 5 books. So he's gone on, we always talk about what people have done post-military, post-law enforcement. And here John has gone on to amazing things as a New York Times best-selling author. John, we do share something in common, and you share something in common with another previous guest we had on. So John, I believe 50 years ago, you were in Vietnam. Am I correct?
That's correct. Ago? Yep.
All right, John, quick question. 51 years ago, what were you doing?
Okay, so that's just, I had graduated from Lafayette College with a...
Hold right there, John.
Okay.
We share that in common, brother. I too am a pard.
Hey, how about that?
It doesn't happen often that I meet a fellow pard, man. So congratulations.
You're the second one on the show.
Yeah, you're the second. And John, that would explain why you're a New York Times best-selling author. A lot of people haven't heard of Lafayette, but it churns out some brilliant people.
Lafayette was good. I got to tell you, and this may sound really strange, military sent me to DINFOS, the Defense Information School, before Vietnam. That was a better school than any school I'd ever been to. That was such an outstanding course. It was 10 weeks long. It was their journalism course, their applied journalism course. At the time, it was rated as the second best applied journalism course in the country, with only Columbia University being better.
Wow.
And I got to tell you, I learned more about writing and about organization of writing and everything involved in all that whole process, both with, for magazines and for newspapers. I learned some about radio, but I was not in the radio section. So there was kind of a base on that. But I learned more about writing itself, just the very basis of writing in that course than I learned in all of my previous schooling.
No, so sir, that sent you, the United States Army sent you there,
Yep.
And then you became a member of the 101st, I believe, and were a combat correspondent. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was kind of interesting, and I'll just do this very quickly. There were probably about 100 of us Americans in the class. It was multinational. So we had a lot of Vietnamese. We had people from all the different services. We had WACs and waves and, et cetera. But of those of us in the Army, there were about 100 of us. And there were, if I recall correctly, only 3 of us that were going to go to Vietnam. I graduated second in that class, and they told me that I was going to Okinawa, which was the last thing I wanted to do. in my resume, it kind of says I volunteered for Vietnam. It was a lot more than volunteering. Myself and one other guy did not get orders for Vietnam. I forget where he was going. I was supposed to go to open up a newspaper in Okinawa. And we ended up having to get our congressman to intercede to be allowed to go to Vietnam and take the spots of other people. You know, I mean, you know how crazy this whole thing can be. And
God bless you.
But you know, it was a fascinating experience. I wanted to go. I just mentioned to you about, you know, Lafayette. Lafayette at the time, and particularly I was a psych major. And this was very different than the engineering part of the school or any of the science parts of the school. But the psych majors, the psych department, a lot of the, you know, let's say the English department and the humanities, whatever you might want to call them, liberal arts, were at that time pretty anti-war. Now, this was
1969, 1970. Yeah, I mean, it made sense.
Yeah,
and it only got worse after you left. Trust me.
Yeah. I started in '65 and graduated in '69. By '67, that's when it really began rolling. And you know, I mean, I had classes where professors would say, "Oh, I can't teach you anything about the course. You have to learn it all on your own, but we can talk about what's going on in the world." And they would talk about what's going on in Vietnam. And now, I didn't know an awful lot about it at the time, right? But I certainly knew that these guys knew a hell of a lot less than I did. And it was such a turnoff. I mean, I ended up walking out of most of those classes, and I just couldn't stand it. And that was actually part of my motivation for going to Vietnam. You know, so if something good came out of it, it was that, hey, I wanted to go. I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to know what the hell was going on. There's so many, I mean, we were pretty divided at that time. We're not as divided at that time as a nation as we are today, but we were probably, that was probably the second most that we were divided, you know, going back to the Civil War. I wanted to know about it. I mean, I really wanted it. It wasn't a matter of having the experience. It was wanting to have the knowledge that so many people were, you know, basically, and really on both sides, a lot of people were just simply talking out their ass.
No, sir. And you know, on the news, everything was put in again, we always talk about Jane Fonda, and everybody's pointing out whatever their politically slanted ideas of what's going on over there. You know, I learned, and I'm gonna imagine you're a pretty young guy at that time, what, 23, 24 maybe?
I think I went over at 22.
Yeah, so 22 years old, and you're being bombarded with TV and that kind of stuff, nowhere near the way we're bombarded today. But you went over there and put your boots on the ground to see for yourself what was actually happening. And I can't commend you enough. Not that accommodation means anything coming from me, but sir, you know, the balls that it takes to do that. The hottest place, scariest place in the world. And you said, hey, send me. God bless you for that.
You know, and this may sound stupid, all right, but I never had any fear for the first probably 9 months I was there, you know, and it was a matter, you know, send me any place, let me go. And a lot of it I had to arrange myself because that's the way we worked basically worked as independent journalists with a beat of certain units that we covered. And I was with the 1st Brigade and covered mostly the 2nd of the 502nd Infantry and the 2nd of the 327th. So those were the infantry units that I spent most of my time with. But then I also went out with 2nd and 17th Cav and, you know, a number of, the transportation units, dust off, you know, it was a fascinating experience.
But you exposed yourself to all of it, because the units you're talking about, they didn't have a real quiet time over there, if I've read correctly.
Yeah. At that time, it wasn't real. So it was a pretty quiet time in further south in the country, but we were up along the Laotian border and just south of the DMZ, where we were operating. So it was pretty active, but it was fascinating, and the people were terrific. As a young soldier, I did not appreciate how professional in general, the officers' corps was, and particularly the brigade commanders and the battalion commanders. As you began getting down into the company commanders, some of them were very professional. Others needed to learn a lot more before they could truly be that way. And then getting down to the platoons, the lieutenants. Oh God, we had some of the most incredible lieutenants. I think of one guy, James Hill, went on to lead the 101st in that Hail Mary move during the incursion into Iraq.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes,
he
sir.
led that. He led that. He was, when I first met him, he was platoon leader in Alpha Company, 2nd of the 502nd. He went on to take over the company, became the company commander. Company commander decided that he wanted to go and become a F4 pilot. It was a fascinating time and just amazing people.
No, and so there's nothing teaches leadership like combat. You can read all the books you want, all the manuals you think about. You can do all of those things. You're not going to know shit about it until the bullets are flying, and then you learn immediately what matters.
You do, and it's so incredible when you see things that are going on in this country, or actually if you watch a story on TV or something, nobody does that. Where does this come from? Anyway, I think, Sal, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I got a question, John, as a non-military guy, as a combat correspondent in war, are you considered part of the unit when you go out? Are you one of the troops, one of the guys when you go out? Or are you kind of off? Are you considered kind of separate on your own?
As far as the formal structure would go, I would be on my own. But in reality, the first thing I was an infantryman with them, with my 16. So I was like an infantryman with a camera, a camera and a notepad. To say I enjoyed it, that wouldn't really be the right terminology. There were days when I said, "What the hell are you doing out here?" But at the same time, again, I wanted to know everything. I wanted to experience it. I wanted to be able to understand what people were going through, what they were saying. So all of that was really important to me. And you know what? Whenever I've gone into any of my other books, I've wanted to experience or to really understand what's going on. So, my novels are historical novels. This maybe sounds a little odd. The book, my second book was on the Cambodian Holocaust for the sake of all living things. Yep. One of the commanders of the Tank Special Forces, the Special Forces under Lon Nol, after the war and after the book was published, got in touch with me, and this was one of the greatest compliments I think I've ever received. And he said to me, "You know more about Cambodia and the Cambodian people than most Cambodians." There were some very important things that happened to me personally in writing that book and in studying what happened in Cambodia and the people and the movements of the militaries and all of these different things and studying it from the communist side. You may be aware of this, that, I'm growing up basically through the 60s, right? Big thing at that time was there's no such thing as good and evil. There's only shades of gray. I imagine you've heard that before.
I'm familiar with the expression. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that was very common in the 60s and 70s. You look at what went on in Cambodia, you really study it, and you study the communist side. you cannot come away and say there's no such thing as evil. I mean, you could not find probably a more evil element in the world at that time than what was going on over there. And so, that study and that, okay, and maybe I come through, come at it to a certain extent from a psychologist's point of view, but I'm not a psychologist. I mean, that's just my degree. But I come at it, I think, in some ways from that point of view. But you develop much, much more after that, and you develop a lot more of a sense of history, and what's going on today with the media and all the lies in the media and all the distortions in the media. You go back to that time. Some of the most famous histories about the Cambodian Holocaust, excuse me for this, are just crap. At that time, while I was studying it, I had to put together essentially my own order of battle, and particularly for the communist forces. And as soon as you do that, all these histories just fall apart. They're political histories, and Pol Pot or some communist leader said this, or we didn't have any troops there. Well, and then you do an order of battle, and you find all these different units there, and different days, and how they're and where they're moving, and stuff like that. So it's all of these things go into what you're doing as a writer, but also, I mean, this all begins changing your perspectives as you're looking at it, and you bring all of that to what's going on today.
No, sir, and you did it as a human being, and you did it at a time where, Americans were being taught to question and do their own research, and they would go, guys like you would go and research and that. In today's day and age, people are just bombarded with what they see on social media. They don't even read articles anymore. They click on headlines and then they react to that. They don't do any of their own research. They'd never do an order of they would never go back and look at any of those things to question. Right? They just take, hey, if it's Fox News saying this, okay, I'm going, and I lean that way, that's what I'm going to go with. Or if it's CNN and I heard CNN say something that I agree with, I'm going with that. Nobody does their own research anymore. And I think that's a huge reason for the division in our country now, is we're believing things that just aren't real.
And I think you're exactly right. I mean, the polarization that we have going on in this country today, and whether it's men from women or amongst the races, or whether it's cities from suburbs, from ex-Serbia, I mean, these are horrible things that are going on that should not be going on. There's so many people. I say to a lot of my friends that have particular points of view, I often say, "Hey, haven't you figured out yet that they're lying to you?"
Nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah, they don't want to. You really, this pandemic is a good example of it. I mean, I'm not sure how much I want to get into this, but if you look at what's going on with hydroxychloroquine, and you look at what has happened in the 10 or 12 countries that use it prophylactically, you could have shut down this pandemic probably in a month, 2 months, had you accepted that. If you look at the studies that say, oh no, it's dangerous, well, almost all of them have been withdrawn. And yet you still have so many people pushing for it. You have to say, well, why are they pushing for it?
Exactly. What's in it for them has got to be the question you ask.
Exactly. And you're talking trillions of dollars at stake for for companies developing vaccines. And you're also talking, though, people pushing the shutdowns for political reasons.
Yes.
We don't need to be shut down.
Hey, listen, John, be careful, man. It's only a 99.7 survival rate or something. Better be careful out there.
We don't want that 0.003%. We don't want anything happening to them.
Yeah.
Hey, let me just take
go
you
ahead.
back real quick, though. I want to take you back. So you go to Vietnam. you know, you're a soldier, combat correspondent, you know, your kind of your auxiliary duty is, you know, you get out of battle and you're recording, right? I mean, you're writing down and recording, you know, things that are going on, how they're going on, why they're going on. You're done. You get back from Vietnam. What do you do then? Tell me, how does it evolve into you becoming an author? Tell me, what do you do when you get home? What kind of reception did you get when you come back, and what was your situation?
Yeah, my situation was a little bit different than the average guy, in that I then followed up with a tour in Germany.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, I mean, when I got back, and a lot of this was because I wanted to do it this way. It wasn't that I didn't have people that would have come and immediately picked me up. But you know, I came into Fort Lewis, Washington. Some of it I don't even remember. I do remember being on the plane for whatever it was, 17 hours, or you know, probably wasn't that long, but it was one hell of a long flight. And having a guy in the row of seats in front of me going through withdrawal symptoms, because at that time you had a lot of heroin in Vietnam, right? You know, that's when it wasn't so much up where I was up north in the country, but where you know, where the war was essentially no longer going on. And when you
give soldiers time on their hands, shit's going to happen.
Yeah, and you get into 70, 71, particularly down south, you know, different areas of the country at different times. I mean, they change every year during the war. So many historians miss this stuff. That series that came out by Ken Burns a couple of years ago, you know, just incredible propaganda. But you know, I mean, the war changed every year. In every area of the country. Every area of the country was different. You know, different provinces experienced the war in very different ways. You know, you very seldom get that. Anyway, but I can remember coming home, guy going through withdrawal symptoms, and kind of doing our best to calm him down, keep him calm. Finally, you know, I was the stewardesses that just did an amazing job. And then, you know, once we landed, it was you know, MPs came on the plane, took him off first before we got off. But there's very few things I remember. You know, everybody talked about, oh, we're going to get a steak dinner when we got home and stuff. You know, we got none of that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. But when I then flew to New York, I'm from Connecticut, flew to New York, took a limousine from the airport to my hometown, and then I walked home from where they dropped me off.
What's your hometown, sir?
Stratford, Connecticut. Yeah.
I grew up in Windsor, Connecticut.
Okay.
First town established in 1633, just saying.
Yep. Stratford was 1636. Yeah, very early on. And those are very interesting histories, and a lot of that, you know, the way history is portrayed today, you know, they cut out so many of the good things and tell you all the nasty things that Americans did and different religions did at that time.
That seems to be very popular in today's day and age. Let's read history and only tell parts of it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it's just more crap, more propaganda, and more things that polarize us and divide us instead of the harmony that should be there.
Instead of reminding us that we're all Americans and citizens of the greatest country in the world.
Here's an example, all right? If you look at the time, the way the newspapers reported it, and still currently today, the way history in general records it, you can read a tremendous amount about the conflicts between blacks and whites in Vietnam, right? Between soldiers. A much bigger story at the time, and you got to remember when we're coming from to that time, much bigger story is the harmony between blacks and whites within the military. That's never told.
Well, that doesn't sell newspapers. That doesn't sell books. You know?
It's a much, much more important story. And had that story been told, imagine the effect it has on culture, that becomes part of our ambient cultural story, or supplant that term with narrative. How does that impact us all, right?
Yeah, have we done it then? Where would we be now?
Exactly, and so there's so many of these same kind of things, throughout this last 50 years. Yeah. Had we been telling the story of what really what happened, instead of the story that, as you say, what sells the newspapers?
No, sir, and I tell you, I tried to touch on that a bunch in my book because, I policed in a predominantly Black city in Savannah, Georgia. And, a lot of my partners coming through the department, they're Black and white and all that kind of stuff, but none of that matters. What matters always is the mission. How do we get this done as brothers and sisters and all, we are the world type of stuff. But, I can tell you all about my friends, Josh and Rufus and Floyd and Greg and all those guys. What color they are, it's not pertinent to the story.
Yeah, we used to have a saying in Vietnam that an AK round doesn't care about your paint job.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Man, that's the truth. And, all right, John, let me reel it back in though. So you're out of the Army. What was it, 1970?
72. I spent a year in Germany with the 72nd Field Artillery Group.
Where in Germany?
I was in, our headquarters was in Wertheim, a small town there. We controlled 1/4 of all the nuclear, land-based nuclear weapons in Europe. Right. So, our job was, if it happened, was to stop the Soviet tank invasion through the Fulda Gap into Europe, into Western Europe. Again, an interesting time. That time, and I loved being in Germany, but that time really convinced me that I was no garrison soldier.
So what do you do with yourself once you're back in Connecticut?
Well, back for a little while, I take off to Maine and I write the rough draft of 13th Valley until I'm completely out of money. I leave Maine with like $7 in my pocket. And
so no one was paying you to write that book?
Oh, no, no. But it was a rough draft and it was, and it was very rough. And, I came back, I ended up getting my real estate license. I was not ready to settle down. I got an offer from a small newspaper in Dutchess County, New York, to become an assistant manager of their newspaper. Wonderful people. I wasn't ready for any of this at all. So took off and went to California, right? And didn't have any money either. So I got my real estate license and started selling real estate. The third place I lived, when you have no money, you move pretty often. Mm-hmm. The third place I lived, next door neighbor was the Marine Corps recruiter, right? So we become quite friendly, and it is that time, and now we're in late 74, and he's feeding me all this information, let's call it all this intelligence that he's getting about what's going on in Vietnam. And I think a lot of this is very important. Some of this is very pertinent to today. But when we pulled out of Vietnam, right, United States military was out of Vietnam in 73, in January of 73. Mm-hmm. By the time you get into late 74, the Vietnamese communists had established a corridor, would be called at the time along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But we always disrupted that. That's what we were doing there. We always kept them dispersed. They were never able to establish long-term bases there. Even if we only came in and came out and had lots of our battles there, Dong Up Bai, Tabat, Ashaw, all those battles, Dak To, Kem Dak, all of that stuff. But once you pulled out of that area, they ran a 12-inch gas pipeline and a 4-inch oil pipeline down from North Vietnam all the way down to Song Bi City. They then moved in 18,000 military trucks, transporting 400,000 troops, right? So now you've got 400,000 troops on your border, and the South Vietnamese have to be able to cover that entire border, and they have it thinly covered as a defensive mechanism, right? And they have the whole border covered, but they're thinly spread out. Because of the way the things happen, we didn't have the intelligence to, or the South Vietnamese didn't have the intelligence to know just where the North Vietnamese were massing. With all these troops, 500 Soviet T-54 tanks, I think it was 400, 175 millimeter self-propelled artillery pieces. They had all of this stuff. This turns out to be a bigger offensive than anything during the war, and basically bigger than anything that happened in World War II. During any of the blitzkriegs or anything. This is a huge offense that they had going.
Yeah, and you don't read about that now very often, for sure.
Right. Now, but think about this in the way that the South Vietnamese are spread out and trying to defend this entire border area, and the North Vietnamese can mass their troops and hit these thinly defended spots and break through. So that's very much what happened. This, by the way, is also exactly what's happening with Antifa today against so many of your brothers, right? You've got, police departments that are basically thinly spread out or have just so many, I think I've got a number of cousins and friends at the, in the Bridgeport police department in Bridgeport, Connecticut, right? So
not a fun place to police Bridgeport.
Yeah, exactly. So I get a lot of information from them, and I may have this city wrong, but I think it was in Rochester, New York, where I think it's an 1,800 officer department up there. When the riots started up there, Antifa, which stays very dispersed until they are going to pick their target to move in.
Like any other terrorist organization.
Like any other terrorist organization, just what happened in Vietnam. I think they came in, if I recall correctly, with 5,000 of their troops. That's how many people they hit that city with. And again, I'm not certain that it was Rochester. It might have been a different city. So I may have that part wrong, but I remember those numbers. And all of a sudden, this is just overwhelming. So with these kind of things going on today, and then you get, politicians saying, "Oh, this is just a mental concept or an idea."
Peaceful protest and all of the above.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of, it's well funded and it's well organized, and
yes,
why our brothers and sisters in the FBI why this is not their number one priority is a mystery to me, right? Because this is a domestic terrorist organization. Why is this not the FBI's number one priority?
It's very well funded. These troops are very well organized. They're trained. The logistics support behind them, coming in with food trucks for them, to supply them, and their commo, their communications while they're in a riot, and that entire command structure that they have. I mean, it should scare anybody. Yep. It should scare the shit out of anybody who understands. Anybody who understands it does, and anybody who learns about it should be scared about it.
No, and the technology that's available today to any organization, it's just, it's absurd. People with non-tactical minds and thinking don't think about it, and they don't see, the potential for the danger that's there. But I mean, anybody with half of a military mind sees what's happening, like Sal was saying, how we're not making that public enemy number one, and how we're not doing something about it now. and I mean proactively. We can't sit back and wait for, Rochester. We can't wait for Portland to happen again. We can't wait for Baltimore. Can't wait for Ferguson. We can't do that. And a lot of people will get mad and say, "Oh, it's a racial type." It's not. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the safety, security of our internal, infrastructure.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah, these liberal state and county prosecutors, they're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to put anyone in prison. So it's up to the feds. I mean, we can spend.
Sal, I hate to cut you off, but they're going to try and put police officers.
Yeah, that's
anything
that
they shape, fold, anything they can do, just like they're doing again in Savannah, Georgia. They're going to shape and mold corruption charges on men and women who are just out there doing their job, keeping their community safe. And are they perfect? No. But those are, rather than go after the bad guys, that's who these liberal district attorneys and state's attorneys, that's who they're going to go after.
Yeah. It's them, and it's also the state governors and legislatures. I know here in Connecticut, police reform, right? I don't know how they get away with even saying that, using that term, but they got rid of how do you say it? The liability, whatever the liability clauses were that protected police, right?
Qualified immunity.
Yeah. Okay.
They hamstringed it completely. I still got buddies. I was a cop in Windsor, Connecticut for a short time, my hometown, but Connecticut's a union state, and they've been hamstrung, and that's going to happen all over the country. We're going to take the teeth out of our law enforcement dogs to where they can't bite anymore and be extremely ineffective. And guess who is going to capitalize on that?
Oh, big surprise, huh? Not just the terrorists, but every criminal organization you can think of.
Yeah, when do we get criminal reform? We don't really need police reform. We need criminal reform.
What we should do is start making some of these crimes we'll make them double secret illegal. So stealing and looting and rioting and shooting people and even murder, we'll put that on the list to be double secret illegal. That's going to be something I propose.
It's kind of sickening. As you well know, John, in combat, when you're a soldier, you cannot be Monday morning quarterbacked and judged on the actions you take when you're trying to save your partner's life and your own life and complete your mission. And it's the same in law enforcement.
But then we see it again. So in combat, it's inconceivable to be held responsible by a civilian standard. Yet, our friend Eddie Gallagher charged with murder. Some of the other cases that are going on nationally and seeing it's sickening. It's disheartening. I never thought I would say it, but I can't imagine why anybody, any young man or woman, with any hopes and dreams or aspirations to be successful in their life would ever pick up a weapon, a badge, and expose themselves to this scrutiny. I'd rather go clean up trash the rest of my life, get a steady paycheck so nobody fuck with me.
Yeah. I was going to mention that kind of thing, but let's project the ramifications further. What happens when the good people will not become police officers, right? So yes, and who is going to become? Because we're still going to have police departments. So who is going to be attracted to that occupation as we move forward? And I think the only people that will do it are people who are in it for certain personal, they're not there to serve, they're in there for some sort of personal reward that they can use this for either a stepping stone or for whatever they can get out of it while they're in it at the time. You're only going to produce far more corruption by doing what they're doing.
I'm so glad you said that, and I didn't have to, but you're 100% correct. And that's how, the pencil pushing administrative, I call them career police officers as opposed to cops. That's how they are winding up in positions of lieutenant, captain, major, assistant chief. They're politicians. They are not cops.
Armchair warriors, Bootsy.
I'm not trying to provoke anybody though, Sal. You know me, man. I'm scared.
Well, John, I don't know about you. I firmly believe that our past administration started this push to prosecute soldiers and law enforcement officers.
It started with Eric Holder and has trickled down into the state system.
And Bootsy and I both fell victim to this, but they started this wave of we're going to flip the script and we're going to go after our soldiers and our police officers. You know, after we've given them a mission, we're gonna make them the bad guys, go after them. And in fact, it was, in my opinion, it was the beginning of this revolution.
Yeah, and it's continuing today. You know, it's not. I don't see it slowing down at all. You know, again, you know, so
it's very scary. It's very scary. I mean, we're about to lose our country.
Yes,
we're about to lose, you know, all of our freedoms. We are going to jump back, and it may be far more quick than what even what some people project. But you're looking at, you know, looking at it from a historical perspective. We are citizens of our nation, right? And as citizens, we have all these rights. It's not that long ago, and it is still this way in many areas, where people are not citizens of their country. They are subjects of whatever their regime is, right?
You're 100% correct.
Yes, and so this push to do all these things that they're talking about, really, we end up becoming subjects of an elite. And again, you can talk about them being communists or globalists or corporatists or whatever you might want to call them.
Put whatever label you want on it.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, it's really not different than the monarchy that was running France in the 1780s that created the French Revolution. You know, I mean, or what was going on in England, between England and the colonies, you know, before 1775. You know,
John, that's a great segue into your. Let's talk about. Let's finish this out talking about your book that just came out.
Oh, okay.
Tell us a little bit about it.
All right. Well, you know, it's called Demise, with the subtitle of Race, Culture Wars, and Falling Darkness. All right. So it's written in. I'm sorry?
How timely.
Yeah.
I wrote an awful lot of this 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it's so much more pertinent today than it was back at that time. But, you know, it deals with, deals with the polarizations, it deals with crime, it deals with what's going on between the cities, what's going on between the races, deals with what's going on in the schools. So it has all these aspects. When I write, all my books have a geometric pattern to them. So when I'm doing this, I kind of think in a lot of geometric terms. For this book, I considered it to be 3 concentric circles, with the core circle being a suicide contemplation by one of the major characters. All right. And it's a very short period of time. It goes over a 1-week period, but it's spread out. And then the circle around that is the main story, which takes place over about 100 days. And it's all the things that finally lead him up to this need to commit suicide, or to believe he needs to commit suicide. And then the final outer circle of that is his flashbacks going back to, I guess they go all the way back to about 1955, bringing him forward. One of his very closest friends, this goes into high school, graduating in 65. His closest friend, he's white, his closest friend was black. His friend goes to Vietnam. He drops out and gets into the music culture. The Woodstock culture and into drugs. they finally come back together and a number of years later in a suburb, as in high school, they are, and so they're very close friends. They're the salt and pepper backs of their high school football team. All right. They go on to the state championship. So I mean, there's a lot that, there's a lot in there. And there's a lot of to tell you the truth, there's a lot of that I experienced myself in high school. There was a lot of us that were very close, and that, 60s really, 50s and 60s, and really, coming out of the 40s, you have tremendous changes in the perceptions of race in this country at that time. And in many ways, I thought we had gotten over that in the 60s and going into the 70s. I thought we'd put a lot of that behind us, and that we really had gotten onto that feeling of, Martin Luther King saying, judge every person by their character, not by the color of their skin. And I thought we'd moved an awful long distance towards that. And the setbacks that have happened since the late 70s and much more in the 90s, and then to the greatest extent most recently. But anyway, there's a lot of that goes on in the book. They come together, end up living in the same town outside of the city that they grew up in, working for the same corporation. They're now two corporate officers. They're looking at what's going on. This story takes place in the 1990s. They're looking at the economic downturn and a corporate takeover of their corporation, which is destroying the economic pictures of both the city and the whole surrounding area. So it's almost like what happens with the pandemic today, of this huge increase in in unemployment, and how that plays out. It just exacerbates all these polarizations that that are there no matter what, but are so often, when things are good, these are very limited. When things are bad, they just get out of control. So that's
it winds up every man for himself, which again is where we're at.
Yes, and so that's a lot about what Demise is all about, and it's this whole story of as this all moves forward, and finally all three of the stories coming together at the very end, and you're having essentially the crescendo at the very end.
No, sir, coming from a guy with a liberal arts background who could have avoided Vietnam, but said, "Hey, oh no, send me. Hey, Congressman, they're not sending me soon enough. Jump in." So coming from a guy like you, I can't wait to delve into it. I've poked at it, but I cannot wait to read the whole thing. And now talking to you, now I'm fascinated. I got to get deep into
Thank
it.
you.
Hey, I can't wait, John. I can't wait to read this book. I mean, the way it sounds so multidimensional. Bootsy's book was very one-dimensional, by the way. Bootsy.
One-dimensional, and I wanted to say that. I didn't want to interrupt you, but you were talking about you like to organize it by shapes and all that kind of. There's no structure in my book whatsoever, none. I mean,
you're not
even sentence structure. If I'm, if I do say so myself.
You didn't go to Lafayette, buddy. All right.
Westfield State Fighting Owls, sir. Oh, you've probably heard of us.
Westfield. All right, hey John, we're gonna wrap it up, man.
Okay.
I tell you what. First of all, I can't wait to order your book and read it. I can't wait.
Thank you.
And just speaking personally, man, not only because of the Lafayette connection, but what an honor. It's such an honor to me to talk to anyone who's a New York Times bestseller and also a Vietnam vet, because like Bootsy and I said before, man, you guys are at the top of. You're the top rung of our ladder of importance, man. Who needs to be out there in the world today, writing books and doing podcasts and telling people the way it should be, because the way it is isn't too good right now.
I know. I thank you so much for that. And like I said before, you guys right now are on the front lines of all of this, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, and all the things that you and your brothers and sisters are doing. And it's not for a year tour. You guys made careers of this. It's just to me, this is just it's unbelievable how terrific you guys are.
Wow.
Yeah. I hide behind the sandbags now because I'm done with all of that. It's much safer and let the young guys go out and do it. But sir, like I said, I will always hold Vietnam veterans like yourself in the highest esteem. Like I said, you guys like me and Sal and our buddies, we don't exist unless we had to look up to guys like you. And I appreciate your service and this, service of your brothers and sisters also. But you're also a friend of Captain Dale Dies, and anybody who's good in his book is good in my book. Great American.
He is a great American. Absolutely.
Sir, the sadder part of our show is we always end, we try to give shouts out to fallen law enforcement officers who've fallen in the line of duty, around the line of duty, and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to take a minute to highlight some brothers that we lost just recently, not locally, but close enough to home, right outside the city of Atlanta. Fulton County Sheriff's Deputies Anthony White and Kenny Ingram. Their end of watch was September 29th, and they were killed in a fatal car wreck, two of them together, but, lost in an accident. Just going out there, the risks you never even think about. You see CNN, MSNBC about all these evil cops and stuff like that. And here we have two young men in the prime of their lives going out serving their community and being cut down in that service. Guys, I'll always remember you. And, end of watch, we will remind people that you not only lived, but that you served.
Yeah. And, I'm not even going to get, I don't have any specifics today. But I can tell you this, every time I see that a soldier has died overseas, or a brother or sister law enforcement officer has died anywhere in this country, and it doesn't get anything but a blip on most channels anymore, if even that.
If it gets that, yeah.
If that, that's right. But I'll tell you what, man, it's people like us, I think about it every day, and I honor those people, and I know there's a place in Valhalla for all of them. Yeah. And I just want to say God bless anyone and everyone who has served, who is serving, and who will serve. And that's how I'm going to sign off.
Amen.
All right, gentlemen.
End of Watch with Bootsy and Sal. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and more.